God's Pure Word of Faith with Richard Hardin can now be heard on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday mornings at 7 a.m. Central, 8 Eastern, and on Sunday mornings at his regular time, 6 Central, 7 Eastern. Join with him and let's turn our country back to God. It only takes a spark to start a forest fire. Let's get on fire for the Lord. Right here on K98 Talk and the Spark Radio Network. The staff of K98 Talk and the Spark Radio Network is proud to announce that our very own Rowdy Rick Robinson has been selected as one of the top conservative talk show hosts in the nation for his program America Off the Rail. Again, congratulations to Rowdy Rick Robinson for a job well done and another reason to stay connected to K98 Talk and the Spark Radio Network. K98 Talk is expanding its lineup for 2015. This means we are expanding our advertising base. Whether you're a startup trying to push through to the next level or an established business trying to supplement your advertising budget, web-based advertising is a solid investment. Thanks to Talk's newest partnership with TuneIn Radio and instant access to our sister station, K98 FM, we give you worldwide access at a reasonable cost. Interested parties should email us at sales@k98fm.com. Here's a few tips in finding Richard's podcast. Go to the World Wide Web at k98talk.com. Scroll down to podcasts. When podcast comes up, look for a red button with a white plus sign in it. Open this content in a new window by clicking the link. When a new website appears, click on Shows, then scroll to God's Pure Word of Faith. Click on the name and a list of programs will come up. That's it. Now enjoy God's Pure Word of Faith with Richard Hardin. Visit Richard's website at rahardin.com. That's the World Wide Web at rahardin.com. At his website, you can see a summary of the 6 books he has written, where purchases may be made. He also has a link to 18 videos on YouTube and several blogs about Christian beliefs. If you prefer, visit amazon.com/Kindle and type in Richard Hardin to see and purchase his books. God's Pure Word of Faith with Richard Hardin can now be heard on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday mornings at 7 a.m. Central, 8 Eastern, and on Sunday mornings at his regular time, 6 Central, 7 Eastern. Join with him and let's turn our country back to God. It only takes a spark to start a forest fire. Let's get on fire for the Lord. Right here on K98 Talk and the Spark Radio Network.
But now I'm found, was blind, but now I see.
You're listening to God's Pure Word of Faith with Richard Hardin. Richard will guide you through the Bible and help you find God's purpose for your life. Now here's teacher and author Richard Hardin.
Welcome to God's Pure Word of Faith. I'm Richard Hardin, and I want to just thank the Lord and thank the management of K98Talk.com for this great opportunity to share with you again about God's Word. I'm going to be sharing with you this morning a story about the Book of Nehemiah, and the title of that is from the main character of the story, Nehemiah, who was a cupbearer to a king. He was deported into slavery. And he was actually serving the king where he was had been deported to. Well, Jerusalem, the capital and everything, had been left in disrepair. Most of the people had been deported in other places also. So very few people lived there. There were a lot of empty houses and stuff. So local foreigners, you might say, came in and lived in these houses, and they mixed in with the priesthood, and it was just in terrible condition. No one took care of the physical plant, you might say, and the walls were crumbling, falling down. The gates to the city to protect the city was, broken down. It was just complete disrepair. And some of the people came from Nehemiah's homeland and told him about this. And they said the remnant, or the people that were left there in captivity in the province, are in great affliction, reproach. And the wall of Jerusalem is broken down, and the gates thereof are burned with fire. So they're just wide open to any kind of attack or people, coming against them. And it's kind of a similarity to what our country's like today, with our walls down, just people just coming in freely to our country and living wherever they want to like that. These people, lived in Jerusalem that, weren't Jews and everything, mixed in with the priesthood, the religious, spiritual condition of the city was terrible, like the religious, spiritual condition of our country is, being freedoms taken away, and, just persecuting Christians and different things like this. It's just pushing God out of everything. Well, that's the way it was there. They were just living in almost complete disrepair. And so when Nehemiah heard about this, now the reason I'm sharing this today is because we need a Nehemiah to come forth in our country. Nehemiah is the last book of history about the Jews before the birth of Jesus. And he then sought the Lord. He was so upset when these people came and told him how bad Jerusalem, the condition of Jerusalem was. He started seeking the Lord and praying and everything. Well, when somebody gets a burden like that, normally that person's the one God's going to call, to do the work. Anyway, Nehemiah then fasted and prayed, and he had to go in. He was a cupbearer to taste, or drink the wine before the king would, because if it was poisonous or something, well, then the cupbearer would be the one that would, get the poison first and protect the king. Anyway, he was the cupbearer for the king, and he prayed and sought the Lord. He went into the king. Well, he was selected. God called him out then, and the king allowed him to go. He went back to Jerusalem. He restored or rebuilt the walls of Jerusalem, and cleaned out the foreigners from mixing in with the priesthood, and he helped turn the nation back to God. And that's what we need. We need a cleansing in our country, and rededication and a turning to the Lord, the God of the Bible, that helped establish this country 200 years ago. We need a Nehemiah today to close and rebuild our walls, our borders, and get this spiritual condition headed back in the right direction. But before I get too far into that, I want to share with you about how to get to my website, which has several items of information. I have 18 videos linked to it that you can go to and listen to many different subjects. I have 6 books that are described in the website, and information how to obtain those books, a blog with 20-something messages. Also, we have 40-something podcasts of previous broadcasts stored in Spreaker, and I'll also explain to you how you can get to those previous podcasts, because there's one that's very important with today's message. It's the U.S. versus Isaiah 9:11. It appears that something happened described in the book of Isaiah about a condition similar to our 9/11, and how the people of Isaiah's day that he was talking about, how they responded in the same way that we responded, or vice versa. We responded in the same way they did, and how God was displeased with them and their response and everything. And there was a rapture in Isaiah before God brought about his punishment for them. So it appears that, our 9/11 and the story in Isaiah are very similar and may have some, significance for us today. And the title of that podcast is, U.S. versus Isaiah 9/11. And I'll explain to you how you can get to those previous podcasts if you're a new listener.
Visit Richard's website at rahardin.com. That's the World Wide Web at rahardin.com. At his website, you can see a summary of the 6 books he has written, where purchases may be made. He also has a link to 18 videos on YouTube and several blogs about Christian beliefs. If you prefer, visit amazon.com/Kindle and type in Richard Hardin to see and purchase his books. Here's a few tips in finding Richard's podcast. Go to the World Wide Web at k98talk.com. Scroll down to podcasts. When podcast comes up, look for a red button with a white plus sign in it. Open this content in a new window by clicking the link. When a new website appears, click on Shows. Then scroll to God's Pure Word of Faith. Click on the name and a list of programs will come up. That's it. Now enjoy God's Pure Word of Faith with Richard Hardin.
Welcome back. Now I'm going to be reading most of today's material from the book of Nehemiah in showing you the development of this, how after I explained a while ago that some of Nehemiah's friends, he was in captivity as a cupbearer to the king, that had deported most of the Jews from Jerusalem back to his kingdom and was using them as slaves and servants and everything. Well, when people came and told Nehemiah how bad Jerusalem was as far as the structures falling down, the walls and the gates and things like this, and then how bad the priesthood was and everything, well, he was very sad about it. Said he wept, he mourned, and prayed and fasted. But doesn't say what God said to him. But after explaining that, he prayed and repented and confessed the sins of the people and confessed his sins, and leading up to this captivity and everything. And then in chapter 2 of Nehemiah, he has to go back in before the king, daily, like that, to perform his duties and stuff. Well, here it just says that, now I had not been before time sad in his presence. Now this is one of the things, he was sad about the condition of Jerusalem and burdened and everything, and he had been praying for several days and talking to the Lord, but he went before the king sad. Now that was something that the people weren't supposed to do. The king wanted people to be smiling and happy around him and everything. He didn't want, people coming in, grumbling, griping, bad attitudes and things like this. So it says that he had never before been sad in the king's presence. And the king said that, why is thy countenance sad, seeing thou art not sick? And this is nothing else but sorrow of the heart. Then it says here that Nehemiah says, and I was very sore afraid, because that wasn't the way it's supposed to be. And he said unto the king, let the king live forever. Why should not my countenance be sad when the city, the place of my fathers, the sepulchres, lieth waste, and the gates thereof are consumed with fire? And it says in the scriptures that the king's heart is in the hand of the Lord, and turneth the king however he will. And also in Proverbs says, the preparation of the heart and man, the answer of the tongue is from the Lord. God had already been working in that king, even though he may not have known it, or like that. But his response here, the king said unto Nehemiah, for what dost thou make a request? And so he responded then and said to the king, if it please the king, that let me go back to my city and do something about this, and give me letters, like that, for protection as I travel and go back, across the different lands like that and through the different jurisdictions and everything. Letters of protection, from the king, and letters to the people that control the king's forest and things, that I can, get the wood and the things that I need to restore Jerusalem, the walls and the gates and everything. And the king granted it to him, just according to, what he asked for and everything. The king went along with it, and he asked him, well, how long are you going to be gone? He said, well, he didn't know about that and everything, but that he would, go perform the work and come back and report to the king and everything. Well, that was kind of amazing to him and everything, but God had, set this up to where he was sending Nehemiah now as the one to go back and straighten things out. There was a problem with that, though, because when he got there was a guy called Sanballat, a Horite, and Tobiah, a servant over there, and an Ammonite. Now, Ammonite was some of Lot's descendants. They were there, and he had to face these people. They did not want him to do any of the thing, because see, they were prospering there, you might say, living free and living off the Jews, the few that were left there and everything. But when Nehemiah got to Jerusalem, it said he rose in the night with a few men, and he didn't tell anybody what he was doing, but he surveyed the city. He went around the city at nighttime, and he looked at the gates and the walls and all these different things to see just how bad everything was. And then he went up to the nobles and rulers and talked to them about it and said, you see the distress that we're in. Jerusalem lieth in waste. Let us build up the walls of Jerusalem, that we no more be a reproach to all the people around us. Now, when Sanballat and Tobiah and Geshem, an Arabian, when these three heard about it, they were benefiting very much from the condition that Jerusalem was in, because they were living off the people, and cheating them and different things like this. They heard it, they started laughing at him and scorned him, and did everything they could to kind of cause them to be disheartened and everything, and in their effort and everything. And they said, what is this thing that you do? Will you rebel against the king? And Nehemiah answered them, the God of heaven, he will prosper us. Therefore we his servants will arise and build, but ye have no portion, no right, no memorial in Jerusalem. He was telling them, this is none of your business and everything. This is our land, and so on. And then even the high priest and everything, he wasn't in too much of agreement with what was going on here. Again, when Sanballat heard that they were building the walls and saw how fast they did it, well, it turned out that it only took them 52 days to rebuild the walls. He was very mad and upset, and he mocked the Jews and everything, and they said things like, what do these feeble Jews do? Will they fortify themselves? Will they sacrifice? Will they make an end of the day and revive the stones out of heaps of rubbish? And then Lot's descendants and the rest of them jumped in. They were trying to discourage them and get them to stop. Well, his response, Nehemiah's response was, hear, O our God, for we are despised, and turn their reproach upon their own head. Now see, a lot of times this happened throughout the scriptures, of what people were trying to do to the people of God, God had it come back upon them, like in the book of Esther, where Esther's uncle Mordecai was being despised by Haman, the evil man that was going to kill all the Jews in the book of Esther. Well, Haman hated Mordecai, the Jew, so bad that he built a scaffold to hang him, have him hung right out in the middle of the city. Well, it turned out that Haman himself was the first person hung on that scaffold that he had built to hang Mordecai. God had turned it around to where he had protected Mordecai, and Haman was the one hung on it. And this is what Nehemiah is praying here. He says, turn their reproach upon their own head and give them a prey in the land of captivity. And but it came to pass that Sanballat, Tobiah, and the Arabians and others that were against him heard that the walls of Jerusalem were made up and that the breaches began to be stopped, and they were very, very mad. So they started conspiring against Nehemiah and the people, and they came to fight against Jerusalem. But Nehemiah, nevertheless, we made our prayer unto God and set a watch against them day and night because of them. Now see, his response every time these people come against him is to turn to God. And that's the way we've got to be in our life. We've got to be anytime, well, one of my favorite scriptures is Philippians 4:6 says, and be anxious for nothing, but in all things with prayer and supplications, and with thanksgiving, let your requests be known to God. And that's what's happening to him. Every time these people come against him and them rebuilding the walls, he turns to the Lord and prays. And again, these people, the adversaries, they shall not know, neither see, till we come in the midst of them and slay them and cause the work to cease. See, they were lived to where they were going to be coming in and like spies into the city and causing disruptions and things like that to stop the walls from being built. And it came to pass, that they looked and rose up and said unto the nobles, to the rulers, to the rest of the people, be ye not afraid of them. Remember the Lord, which is great and terrible, and fight for your brethren, your sons, your daughters, and your wives and your children. He's encouraging the people inside Jerusalem and everything, because there's such a mixture of people there and everything, and it's hard to get this separation to where they can have complete control. And God had brought their counsel to naught. That is, these people that were going to sneak in and stop the work and just destroy things like this. God brought it to light so they could defend against it, and naturally that made them so mad and everything like that too. But what Nehemiah did then, he armed all the people, had them get their spears and swords and things like this, and actually work. Some of them had they held spears in their hands as they were working, and other people were watching for protection. He put them in shifts. Half of them would watch to defend the city, and the other half would be working with spears in their hand. That's how bad the situation was for them. And it just went on like this, back and forth. It came then that it says there was a great cry of the people and of their wives against the brethren of the Jews. That is, that what happened was during the time before Nehemiah, right before he got there, Sanballat and the others that was against him and everything was charging these people and actually making them pay rent for the houses they were living in. And they said, we have to borrow money of the king's tribute to pay for our lands and vineyards and things. Well, he got very angry. He said, I was very angry when I heard their cry in these words, and I consulted with my nobles. I rebuked the nobles and rulers and said unto them, you exact usury, or interest rates, high interest rates, every one of his brother, and I set a great assembly against them. Well, the Jews that he was talking to, these nobles and everything, they repented, they held their peace, and he told them it's not good. You shouldn't do this to your brethren and everything, because of the fear of God like this. So he straightens this out, and they agreed then to restore their lands to them and to cut out the high interest rates and all this stuff they were charging these poor Jews living throughout the city and everything. We'll restore them, and we'll require nothing of them, so that we can do as thou sayest. Then I called the priest and took an oath of them that they would do according to their promise and everything. See, he's starting to straighten up now, the priesthood, the treatment of these people. He's building the walls and doing all this. Now, it came to pass that Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem, the Arabian, and the rest of the enemies, they were going to do everything they could to not allow the gates to be rebuilt. See, the walls have been rebuilt now, but they can still get in and out through the gates. And they decided, well, we'll send to him. And they sent a message to Nehemiah and says, come, let us meet together in one of the villages. But they sought to do him mischief and everything. They were going to hurt him and do something. But he sent back to a messenger and said, I am doing a great work so that I cannot come down. So why should the work cease while I leave it and come down to you? In other words, he wasn't going to come to him. He said, I'm going to stay here and do the work. And then they sent to him 4 times after that. They kept sending messages. We want to talk with you. We want to deal with you. And he knew what they were trying to do, so he refused to. And he says, Geshem said, thou and the Jews think to rebel. They're sending a message back to the king now. They can't get him to respond correctly, so they're going to send a message back and say that he's building the walls, he's going to make himself king, and he's going to rebel then from the king that had allowed him to come over and rebuild the walls. And said he's preaching that he's going to be the king. And so let's see here. He responds to them, there's no such thing done that thou sayest, but thou, just makes this up out of your own heart and mind, and you're lying against us and everything here. So they can't get him to respond in however they want him to like that, so they're going to threaten him, with telling the king that he's rebelling and everything, so that the king will come over and start. And they keep saying, let us meet together in the house of the Lord and everything. Why should such a man as I flee? Well, they wanted Nehemiah to go hide in the temple, and so that these people wouldn't hurt him. He says, why should such a man as I flee, being who I am, to go into the temple to save my life? I will not go in. And he said, I perceived that God had not sent this guy to him to tell him to do that, so he refused to go in and hide from these people. He was going to trust in God to take care of him. And he said, my God, thank thou upon Tobiah and Sanballat according to their works. He's praying again, Lord, deliver me from them. The walls were finished in 52 days. They got the gates and everything restored. Then they started looking through the past history of the tribes and everything to allow these people then, the certain correct citizens to live in the city, and they were going to get rid of the other people. They were going to separate this out and make sure that the right people were living in the city from then on, the correct Jews and everything. And I'll take a short break and be right back.
Here's a few tips in finding Richard's podcast. Go to the World Wide Web at k98talk.com. Scroll down to podcasts. When podcast comes up, look for a red button with a white plus sign in it. Open this content in a new window by clicking the link. When a new website appears, click on Shows. Then scroll to God's Pure Word of Faith. Click on the name and a list of programs will come up. That's it. Now enjoy God's Pure Word of Faith with Richard Hardin. Visit Richard's website at rahardin.com. That's the World Wide Web at rahardin.com. At his website, you can see a summary of the 6 books he has written, where purchases may be made. He also has a link to 18 videos on YouTube and several blogs about Christian beliefs. If you prefer, visit Amazon.com/Kindle and type in Richard Hardin to see and purchase his books. The staff of K98 Talk and the Spark Radio Network is proud to announce that our very own Rowdy Rick Robinson has been selected as one of the top conservative talk show hosts in the nation for his program America Off the Rail. Again, congratulations to Rowdy Rick Robinson for a job well done and another reason to stay connected to K98 Talk and the Spark Radio Network.
Welcome back. Well, Nehemiah and the Jews there in Jerusalem had restored the walls. They've built them back up. They've built the gates up. And they had to do this, working with a sword in one hand and, working with the other. And half the people, were standing ready to fight to protect from Sanballat and all of these people that was discouraging this. These were the foreigners that had lived in the city and had kind of taken over after the majority of them were deported from outside. Well, they get all this built. They join together then, and they go through the genealogy of all the different tribes of the people that lived around there to make sure that, in a sense, it was like checking out the citizenship list, the genealogy of the Jews and everything, who was supposed to be living in Jerusalem, who were the true Jews and stuff. And they were separating out then all, you might say, the illegals and people that had just moved in empty houses when all the rest of the people were deported out and everything, and just come in and were destroying the city. They were cleaning it out. After this, they get over and they start a worship service. They start praising the Lord, and the priest that had come over from with Nehemiah, they had a worship service and they got all these people together and everything. And as he started reading the books of the law, these people had been so long since they had heard it and everything like that, they started just crying because it meant so much to them. They started crying, and Ezra, the priest, said, "Bless the Lord, the great God," and all the people answered, "Amen." And they started lifting up their hands and worshiping, praising the Lord and everything. And they were crying so much that then one of the famous scriptures that a lot of Christians remember like this is Nehemiah 8:10. It says, "And he, the priest, said unto them, Go your way, eat the fat, drink the sweet, and send portions to them for whom nothing is prepared. For this day is holy unto the Lord, and neither be ye sorrowful, for the joy of the Lord is your strength." We've heard that verse, many of us that have been in church for years, a lot. The joy of the Lord is our strength. Well, that's what it's talking about here. And because they were crying, they were so joyful of hearing God's word again and being read out in public before everybody like they had done before, because that's the way they could hear God's word. Probably the priests were the only ones that could read to where he could read the word to them, and they gathered then as families and everything to hear it, and they were so happy they were crying about it and everything. Well, as this happens then, it says they also got together and they read in the scriptures. It says here that on the day they read in the book of Moses in the audience of the people, and therein was found written that the Ammonites and the Moabites should not come into the congregation of God forever. That was because it says, because they met not the children of Israel with bread and water, but hired Balaam against them, back in the old days, to curse them. But he wasn't able to curse them. God didn't allow him to and everything. But because of the problems when the children of Israel came out of slavery, they were supposed to pass by these countries, and God had told them, because see, the Ammonites now were the descendants of Lot, and he had told the children of Israel when they came out, leave them alone. He told them to leave the Edomites alone, Esau's descendants. He said, I'm not giving you a foot of their land. So God protected these countries and everything from the children of Israel when they came out. Now, these are the people that are coming in there, have been living there and been a part of destroying Jerusalem until Nehemiah come back. God brought him back and started rebuilding it. So when they saw that these people weren't supposed to be in here, they started cleaning house. And it says, now it came to pass when they heard the law that they separated from Israel all the mixed multitude. Now what it means by mixed multitude was the mixed races and everything. The mixed races and the people who were living there that were not Jews. And now the priest that had oversight to all of this, he had a problem with this because he was in cahoots with Tobiah and them in taking these finances and everything from the Jews that were still there and charging them, the high interest rates and stuff, and misappropriating, you might say, the funds of the temple, because Tobiah and these others were living off of the people, and the priest was aiding it. Now, let me share with you. He said, when I came to Jerusalem and understood of the evil that the priest did for Tobiah in preparing him a chamber in the court of the house of God. The priest had even allowed Tobiah to live in the temple. And it grieved me sore, therefore. I cast forth all the household stuff of Tobiah out of the chamber. He went in there, he threw it out. And I commanded that they cleanse the chambers, and thither brought I again the vessels of the house of God with the meat offerings and frankincense. And, they were using the utensils of the temple for themselves and everything. He said, I perceive that the portions of the Levites were the priest, the priestly tribe of the 12 tribes. They were supposed to be serving in the temple and taking care of it and everything. And they were supposed to be living off of the contributions and living off of the tithes that the other people would send in. Well, the few Levites that were there, they weren't getting those tithes. And it said here, I perceived that the portions of the Levites had not been given to them. See, they were taking these tithes from the people, but they were giving it to someone else. And that's almost like today, taking the taxes from the people and giving it to other people and everything like that and living off of them. Anyway, I perceived that the portions of the Levites had not been given them, for the Levites and the singers that did the work of the temple were fled every one to his field. They had to go out and not only, in trying to take care of the temple and everything, but they had to go out and work themselves to provide for their own, things to eat and take care of them. Then I contended with the rulers and said, why is the house of God forsaken? And I gathered them together and set them in their place. Then brought all Judah the tithe of corn and new wine and oil unto the treasuries. See, he got them to start bringing it back into the treasuries. And he cleaned out the people that were operating the treasuries and everything. And he said, I saw in Judah some treading wine presses on the Sabbath. Treading wine presses was, the grapes and everything like that. They would process those and make the wine out of it and everything. And they weren't supposed to be working on the Sabbath. He said, and I saw in Judah some treading wine presses on the Sabbath and bringing in sheaves and lading the donkeys, bringing in to sell things, wine and grape and figs. And all manner of burdens like this were being brought back and forth on the Sabbath, which they brought to Jerusalem. And I testified against them in the day wherein they sold these things. It was just, like a regular marketplace on the Sabbath of coming and going and selling and buying and everything like this. And he said, there dwelt men of Tyre there also, which brought fish and all manner of ware, and sold it on the Sabbath to the children of Judah and in Jerusalem. And Nehemiah says, and I contended with the nobles of Judah and said unto them, what evil thing is this that you do, and profane the Sabbath? Did not your fathers thus? And he's saying this is what happened to us years ago that caused us to be brought into captivity and our nation to be destroyed. He said, did not your fathers the same thing? And did not God bring all this evil on us and upon this city? Yet you bring more wrath on Israel by profaning the Sabbath. Continuing to do that. Not getting any better. We're still doing the same thing. You're doing the same thing that got us into this trouble in the first place with God. And it came to pass when the gates of Jerusalem began to be dark, that is in the evenings, before the Sabbath, I commanded that the gates should be shut. So he's going to shut those gates, and charged that they should not be open until after the Sabbath. So he's going to keep all those money changers and all those people, selling fish and, bringing in the fruit and stuff like this for the Sabbath. He says, and charged them they should not open until after the Sabbath. And some of my servants set I at the gates, that there should, no burden be brought in on the Sabbath day. So the merchants and sellers of all kind were lodged without Jerusalem once or twice. See, so the people came up to bring their wares to sell and to trade on the Sabbath, but they couldn't get in, so they sat outside waiting. And they figured, that sooner or later, they'd open the gates and they'd come in and do it, but he wouldn't let them in until after the Sabbath. And then Nehemiah says, I testified against him, said unto them, why lodge you outside the wall? If you do so again, listen to this. He says, if you keep doing that, if you do it again, I will lay hands on you. Now, that might have been one of the first expressions of laying on of hands in the Bible. But anyway, he's going to lay hands on them, and it's not going to be, to heal them. It's going to be, to get rid of them. From that time forth came they no more on the Sabbath. So he ran them off. And I commanded the Levites, now this is the people of the tribe of priests for the Israelites, that they should cleanse themselves, and that they should come and keep the gates to sanctify the Sabbath day. Remember me, O my God, concerning this, and spare me according to the greatness of thy mercy. So he's had a burden for Jerusalem, had felt in such repair. He had prayed and sought the Lord, and then God called him then to go before the king, and then the king gave him papers and gave him authority to come back over to Jerusalem and restore the walls. And they had to, defend themselves the whole time from all these foreigners and people that were benefiting from this group of Jews that were remaining there. They were cheating them, charging them high prices and everything like this, and high interest rates. And so Nehemiah and his people, they built the walls in such a record time that the people around knew that it was God helping them, but they still resisted him as much as they could. They rebuilt the gates, and now he's cleaning out the, you might say, religious community, and getting it straightened back up and headed truly toward God. And he said, in those days also, I saw that Jews had married wives of Ashdod, Ammon, and Moab. See, there's such a mixture now of children marrying, just anybody and everything. And their children spake half in the speech of Ashdod, and they could not even speak the Jewish language, but according to the language of each people. And Nehemiah says, I contended with them, and he says here, he cursed them, he reviled them, and let them know that's not right. In fact, the scripture says that the 400 years in slavery was a period of time that God actually purified the Jews to keep them separate from everyone else, and in that 400 years they were a purified nation of blood and everything, and a special people to him. But now it's interracial marriage and everything, and it's such a mixture of people and everything. He says, I reviled them and smote certain of them. And he says here, he even plucked off their hair, pulled out their hair, and made them swear by God, saying, Ye shall not give your daughters unto their sons, nor take their daughters unto your sons, or for yourselves. And then he says, did not Solomon, king of Israel, sin by these things? Yet among many nations was there no king like him, who was beloved of his God. And see, so much so that he was the wealthiest king ever in Israel. It says, nevertheless, even him, even Solomon, did outlandish things with the women that caused his sin. He had so many wives he had brought in from foreigners and everything, and they brought their false gods with them. And in the end of Solomon's life, you'll see that he actually started worshiping these false gods with all these different women that he had married and everything. And he had 500 or 600 wives and 700 and something concubines and all this. So there was a lot of false gods that he allowed to bring in and to actually be a part of worshiping them. And that's what Nehemiah is reminding them here. What happened to Solomon, the wisest man, the richest man? God blessed him so much, but all these false gods and things had wiped him out. Also then his son was very evil after him. Solomon's son was. Said he did evil because he prepared not his heart to seek the Lord. And the kingdom was split up and everything, almost destroyed. And then Nehemiah says here, shall we then hearken unto you and do all this great evil to transgress against our God in marrying strange wives? And one of the sons of the priest, his son-in-law, was a son-in-law to Sanballat. See, even these people that had been hindering him all the time and everything, come to find out that Sanballat's son-in-law had married the priest's daughter. Okay, he said, therefore I chased him from me. They chased him out. Remember them, oh my God, because they have defiled the priesthood and the covenant of the priesthood and of the Levites. Thus cleansed I them from all strangers, and appointed the ward of the priest and the Levites, every one in his business. And so here, he had a lot bigger job than he thought when he went over to Jerusalem. He thought he was going to go over and rebuild the walls and rebuild the gates and everything, but he found such corruption that Sanballat was living in the temple. This foreigner was living in the temple, and he was actually running things behind the priest. The priest was his front man. He had married his son to the priest's daughter, and it was just such an intermingling of everything and corruption and stuff. And that's what we have in our society today, not only in politics, but in our religious community, and the 200 or 300 different denominations and everything, one teaching this, one teaching the opposite, back and forth, such a mixture of just what is called religion. And then we have anybody that wants to can sign up and call themselves a religion, even the atheists and witches and all these different type things here. And I'm surprised that the Ku Klux Klan hadn't declared themselves a religion, because they were killing people and destroying people back in the old days, and still some around our country today. But yet the Muslims in their Quran, their book, says to kill everybody that's not a Muslim and everything. You talk about we have so many good Muslims in our society and everything that supposedly don't go with that, but yet you can see all across Europe and all around the world, when they get it to be a certain percent and everything, the moderates supposedly go right along with anything that the other people decide to do and everything. So we have such a mixture of religion and different kinds of things, a boiling pot in our country. The walls, our country walls, are down, the borders, and we need a Nehemiah from the Lord to come along and do something to help get our country headed back to the God of the Bible, because he's the one that established us 200 years ago. And in fact, it was determined that this is a Christian nation. In 1892, a U.S. Supreme Court ruling that this was a Christian nation, the Church of the Holy Trinity versus United States. It's 143 U.S. 457, the finding, the legal finding, and it's 12 S.CT 511, and for the legal edition it says 36 legal edition 226. These findings in February 26, 1892 state that we are a Christian nation, and it has not ever been overturned. In fact, it's not been mentioned much lately, from all the legal people in Washington, D.C. and everything that know that ruling is there, that we are a Christian nation, but they just kind of keep it quiet. Well, the Christian community has too. I haven't heard of anybody, bringing that up in the last few years and everything, but the United States U.S. Supreme Court declared this to be a Christian nation in that particular ruling. Well, we need a Nehemiah that will come forth, and I think in our Christian community one of the problems is there's so much error being taught by so many denominations. Like one group says that Jesus went to hell and fought the devil and came out victorious with the keys to the kingdom and stuff. See, there's nothing in the scripture about that. He didn't go to hell to fight the devil. When Jesus died on the cross, from that time until he was resurrected, it says in 1 Peter chapter 3, chapters 3 and 4, it says he held camp meetings. It says in the Spirit he went to the spirits of the Old Testament and he actually preached to them. It says 3 times there. It doesn't say exactly what he said or exactly who he went to, but he didn't go to hell and fight the devil. Another reason, because the devil's never been in hell. The devil has never been in hell. He's not in hell today as I speak. He's not going to be. If you look in Revelation chapter 20, verse 10, it says the devil and his angels were cast in the lake of fire. Then verse 11 and 12 talks about the white throne judgment, opening the books, and everybody whose name is not written in the book of life is cast into the lake of fire. And then the next verse after that, 13 and 14, says that hell and everything in it was cast into the lake of fire. See, so the devil's never been in hell. He's here on earth deceiving people and doing everything he can to damage the image of God, the image of Jesus, and the grace, the changed heart, the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ to welcome us into the family of God. He's doing everything he can to confuse this and keep people from receiving Christ in their heart for salvation. And the reason he's doing that is because he hates Jesus. The devil hates Jesus. And that's his whole purpose before he is cast in the lake of fire, is to deceive as many people as possible and have them be tormented with him. In Matthew chapter 21, verses verse 41, Jesus explains there that then shall they say unto them on the left hand. This was a separation of the sheep and goats, and the goats being the lost people, the ones going off in the lake of fire. It says, depart from me, ye cursed, into everlasting fire, prepared for the devil and his angels. See, the lake of fire was prepared for the devil and his angels, not for one person. But the devil is here on earth deceiving people. That's why we have so many different denominations and everything, because people in their pride will say, well, bless God, I just believe this and this and this. And and they stick to it. They say, if it's good enough for mom and dad, it's good enough for me. And things like this, instead of seeking the Lord for the truth of his word, because when we stand before the Lord, that's what we're going to have to answer for. And whatever denomination you might be in, you might have a bunch of good friends and neighbors and everything, just all nice people and everything. But then see, you have another denomination that had a bunch of nice friends and people, and they're just as nice and everything and friendly to each other, but they believe exactly opposite. So who's right? God will only back up his pure word. And we don't have 200 or 300 copies of his pure word, that is different, because see, it says in Ephesians chapter 4, we have one God, one Lord, one faith. God's not going to tell all these people different things like this. I tell one that speaking of tongues of the devil, and then the other speaking of tongues is from him. He's not going to tell, something like that. But we have denominations teaching, preaching, good people speaking of tongues of the devil. We have another denomination over here saying speaking of tongues is the best thing that ever happened, and stuff like this. Others say that God doesn't heal today like Jesus did then. He just healed, to support his word that he was bringing forth and everything. But it says 14 times in the scriptures that Jesus healed all that were sick in those great multitudes. Just think of all those thousands of people he healed. And then others say that God does heal today like that. Both can't be right. It's possible both wrong, but they both can't be right. But then just own like that. And you ask people, about salvation or something. What does it take to be saved? In your particular denomination, I would guess that you could probably ask the next 10 people you meet, and your friends and relatives, and every one of them would probably tell you something different. Salvation is not being discussed, but the new covenant for salvation in this day is God's prophecy through Ezekiel in chapter 36, verse 26, where God says, "A new heart also will I give you, a new spirit will I put within you. I'll take away the stony heart out of your flesh. I'll give you a heart of flesh, and I'll put my spirit in you." And Jesus says in John chapter 3, "You must be born again." And that's what happens when he creates in us in that new heart, new, clean, pure heart. And then his Spirit of Christ comes to live in that heart. We are born into the family of God. Like Galatians 4:6 says, "And because your sons, God has sent forth the Spirit of his Son into your hearts, crying, Abba, Father, wherefore you no more a servant but a son. And if a son, then heir of God through Christ." And that's the only way to be born into the family of God. Have you received that transformation? That's the most important thing in your life here on earth, is to know. Start praying and seeking until you know for sure that you've been born in the family of God. Not that you just lived a good life and have a bunch of good friends and a group of people in your church, and it must be so good, it feels so good and everything. Have you received the new heart, the new life that only comes from the Spirit of Christ coming into your heart? Pray and seek and make that the top priority of your life until you can know for sure you're a child of God and you're prepared to stand before Jesus. Good day, and God bless you.
The staff of K98 Talk and the Spark Radio Network is proud to announce that our very own Rowdy Rick Robinson has been selected as one of the top conservative talk show hosts in the nation for his program America Off the Rail. Again, congratulations to Rowdy Rick Robinson for a job well done and another reason to stay connected to K98 Talk and the Spark Radio Network. Visit Richard's website at rahardin.com. That's the World Wide Web at rahardin.com. At his website, you can see a summary of the 6 books he has written, where purchases may be made. He also has a link to 18 videos on YouTube and several blogs about Christian beliefs. If you prefer, visit amazon.com/Kindle and type in Richard Hardin to see and purchase his books. Here's a few tips in finding Richard's podcast. Go to the World Wide Web at K98talk.com. Scroll down to podcasts. When podcast comes up, look for a red button with a white plus sign in it. Open this content in a new window by clicking the link. When a new website appears, click on Shows. Then scroll to God's Pure Word of Faith. Click on the name and a list of programs will come up. That's it. Now enjoy God's Pure Word of Faith with Richard Hardin. God's Pure Word of Faith with Richard Hardin can now be heard on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday mornings at 7 a.m. Central, 8 Eastern, and on Sunday mornings at his regular time, 6 Central, 7 Eastern. Join with him and let's turn our country back to God. It only takes a spark to start a forest fire. let's get on fire for the Lord, right here on K98 Talk and the Spark Radio Network.
Good day